It's wonderful to be with you today. I appreciate all the great people that work to put this together. We're going to go through a ton of information. We're going to talk about principles. We're going to talk about some big thoughts and some very specific in the weeds, how to do virtual major gift fundraising. And I'll be asking you a lot of questions as we go. A few suggestions on watching a Ben Case webinar. I tend to present very dense webinars, and in fact, this one is. So use your pause button. You may want to review this with members of your staff, volunteers, anyone that helps you in fundraising to sort through all the ideas that I'm going to be presenting to you to make sure that you find the ideas that really work for you. I want to make sure that you hear what you need to hear. Different levels of people are watching this, and they have different program needs, and they have more sophisticated and less sophisticated programs. I try to appeal to all of those. So those of you with less experience, you may need to hit the pause button a little more frequently. And those of you who really want to capture and consider some of the ideas that I present to you, you're going to want to hit that pause button too. One of the people that watches a lot of my webinars says when you watch a Ben Case webinar, you need to put on your rocket shoes. So be ready to go. No distractions, get focused, print out the PowerPoint, the slides, whatever it is, so you can make notes as we go through here. Now, I will be asking you questions to help you think through and prepare to make sure that you're really ready to do the virtual ask. Now, we do not know how long this virtual environment is going to last and what the residual impact will be from COVID. I wrote a tip for highly successful fundraisers in June, thinking that we would be starting to travel to see major donors. Now, some of my fundraisers are that I work with, but a lot of them still aren't. Now, my first speculation that I want to talk about with you today, my first one is that more and more major donors will be happy virtually interacting with fundraisers. And let's put ourselves in our donors' shoes. Why do you think major donors will want to interact virtually with fundraisers? Write down your answer in your notes right now. Why do you think they will want to interact with fundraisers virtually now? Certainly safety is going to be one of the reasons. It's going to be easier for them. They're going to want to try to get used to all of their professional and personal interactions being virtual. So you're going to need to make sure that you're keeping up with the times and doing this. Let me mention right here that I include plan giving in my thinking about major gifts because both are very traditional. They're both very relationship based, and they both really happen around face-to-face fundraising. So planned giving is included in what I'm thinking about as I talk about virtual major gift asking. Now, my second speculation is that more and more nonprofits will virtually interact with major donors. Now, why do you think that nonprofits and fundraisers will want to virtually interact with major and planned gift donors? Write your answer down in your notes right now. Certainly, I believe it's because they're going to find out that it's cheaper. We don't have to pay for travel. It's easier. It allows for a whole lot of options, which I'm going to mention, really good options, which I'm going to mention as we go through this webinar. And it potentially allows us to personally interact with more donors. Potentially it does. As my last speculation, let me speculate that our fundraising environment for major gifts will become some sort of a multi-channel hybrid of face-to-face and email and snail mail and phone and now virtual interactions. The exact combination of these media will be determined by who? Write your answer down right now. Who's going to determine what that exact media will be? Who's going to determine it? I can tell you the answer, the individual donors. And you're going to want to make sure that you're paying attention to that to be sure that you're not stepping on their feet and they're interacting with you the way that they want to. Therefore, highly successful fundraisers are learning how to adapt to the virtual major gift fundraising, and they're incorporating its advantages into their everyday fundraising and relationship building activities. This is 100% necessary because our nonprofits rely on major gifts to deliver the necessary services to change lives and save lives. Now, I want you to write down right now at least one major donor one person that you would like to virtually solicit for a major gift. Someone, write their initials, write their name down in your notes so that you can remember that person. And we're going to come back to them as we go through here. No more than 3. 1 to 3 names of people that you want to solicit for a major gift right now. Write it down. I want to make sure that this presentation is practical to you. We have to raise more major gifts for our nonprofits to meet the needs of those that we serve. Gee, Ben, I raise my major gifts face-to-face. How can I raise major gifts virtually over the internet? I can't wait weeks and possibly months. It's already maybe even a year to get a face-to-face meeting. I pose this question to many of the highly successful fundraisers that I work with, including those I coach and mentor, as well as friends and longtime professional associates. And I'm including their thoughts of what they shared with me as part of what I'm sharing with you. And then to update this presentation, I reviewed countless websites and blogs from the for-profit world as well as the not-for-profit fundraising world. So let's talk now about some overarching principles. The first one is bring your can-do attitude. We have to move forward thoughtfully in a timely manner because we have to, folks. Some of you have been doing virtual asking all along. Some need to start. The purpose of this presentation is to provide you answers on how to set up and successfully close major gifts virtually. We can do this. Bring your can-do attitude. Next, I want to encourage you to stick to the importance of your mission, the urgency of your work, and commit to being agents of light. Your mission, vision, and message matter, possibly more than ever. Do not waste time cursing the darkness. Now, also do not assume or presume. Never assume somebody is not ready to make a gift, and never presume that they are or aren't. Either way, let's make sure that we are prepared to interact with our folks with no assumptions. You know, someone who is worth $100 million or euros, they're worth $100 million, a whole lot of money, and they lose 30% of that. To most of us, they still have $70 million, which is plenty. But to the individual, they may see themselves as at poverty's door. And one of the problems that we all have is uncertainty. Don't assume or presume anything. People who want to be generous will be generous. Next, I want to encourage you to understand that highly successful fundraisers are approaching major gift virtual asking as an opportunity to master a very robust channel of fundraising. We're going to create a new major gifts model. I consider this webinar a complete success just for you thinking about how to solicit major gifts virtually. And I want to challenge each one of you to improve on what I share with you today. And I invite you to send me your notes and your ideas because I want to hear what they are. Next, I encourage you, give the donor the choice. Always be given the donor the choice. Our job is to present the opportunity. It's their money. When your donors are ready, we will talk with them about a gift. We will discuss with them about doing a virtual pre-ask, which I'm going to talk about here in a little while. By keeping the decision to engage in the donor's court, they can decide when they're ready to participate. And if they want to, never violate sound fundraising principles. Now, there's some experienced professionals on here. I know there's some brand new people too. What do you think is the most important sound fundraising principle? I want you to write that in your notes right now because we want to make sure we never violate fundraising principles. So write down one that you always want to uphold in your notes right now. Next, I encourage you to know your donors. This is really important. And depending on the relationship that you have, there may not need to be as many steps as I suggest here. When I talk about preparing and doing the ask as we get into this webinar here, you may not need to go through all those steps if you have a really great, really strong relationship with your donors. So the point here is be thoughtful, be creative, make sure that you are well prepared. Different people impact are impacted by difficult times in different ways, and they move through the process of dealing with the difficult news and difficult situations at different paces. The key here is to make sure you know your donors. Now, there's some definite obstacles to overcome, and I want to talk about the remedies also, but there's some definite obstacles to overcome within the virtual environment. First is rapport and trust. Sometimes the best part of being in an in-person meeting is the informal small talk before your meeting officially begins. Another real challenge is social cues and body language. You're not in the room to take in all of those physical cues. Tech savvy. I mean, there's some people who are still using flip phones and have never hooked a camera and a mic to their desktop. Some don't even own a laptop. And then, of course, there's the next issue, which a lot of us have, which is distractions. There was a survey of 550 business-to-business salespeople. 88% of them believe participants are multitasking, and 83% of them said that they check email while they're watching and doing other things online during presentations. So there are tons of distractions. And then the next obstacle is very simply, we forget. 90% of what we hear, we forget in 48 hours, and it's potentially worse for virtual meetings especially. Now, let me talk about some solutions to those obstacles. The first solution is get yourself comfortable and confident in the virtual environment by doing it and using it all the time. Create intentional interactions. Take time to just talk. And when you're in the virtual meeting with your donor, invite interruptions. When you start virtual interactions, invite people to interrupt with their questions and their concerns, and then practice. Get comfortable with this environment all the time. You will want to ask interactive and check-in questions, and we're going to review some of those in another section later in this webinar. I encourage you to also offer a tech walkthrough to people that are less experienced in the technology. Offer to walk them through what it's like to do a meeting like this so that they're comfortable with you. I encourage you to invite the donor in. Give them options on how they want to interact with you. And then, of course, keep it simple. Keep presentations interesting and the discussion focused. We will discuss all the options, but keep it simple. We're going to go through a lot of options. Confusion kills gifts. So you want to make sure that your presentation is really simple, a whole lot simpler than this one. And then let me just ask you this, write down in your notes any other obstacles that you think are there and any other solutions that you think are there, because I want you to be thinking about those right now. Next, I want to talk about setting up the virtual ask. This is really important. We're going to spend as much time or more time here as we are going to spend on the actual ask itself. The setup is really, really critical. Now, the first thing that's important here is to let them know you care. This has to be done first. Difficult times impact people in different ways and at different levels and a varying progression. They go through denial, they go through anger, they go through bargaining, they go through depression, and then finally they get to acceptance. And acceptance is where we determine positively how we will react and act and how we will move forward to minimize harm and maximize good. And that's what people need to do. And you want to let them know you care. You want to be working through with them in the process of building the relationship to let them know you care. And I've been advising all the people that I coach and mentor, all the fundraisers, managers, and leaders that I work with, first things first, let them know you care. And then once you've done that, you can start working on a whole lot of other things. The first one I want to mention here is develop your message for today. For today. Sure, we want to have it general, and then we're going to personalize it to the individual when we're making the ask. But that message has to be, number one, focused. It needs to be focused and clear. It needs to convey the impact you want to make with your donors. It needs to be presenting that opportunity. Now, I'm going to be going through a lot of things here. This could be a whole presentation by itself. So use that pause button if you need to. Next, I encourage you to make sure that what you present is motivational. It's appealing and it's inspiring to people. It's memorable and repeatable. And very importantly, it's actionable. The message must also convey the mission of your nonprofit. Like I said earlier, we always want to be based in the mission, and it must convey urgency. Why this is important now. Not emergency, but urgency. The expansion of services that we're trying to do, the opportunity to advance our cause, the immediate needs and concerns that you have about the people that you serve. Let's make sure that we're conveying that urgency. Next, I encourage you to identify the donors that are ready to consider a major gift. Now, this is going to evolve over time because as we move through health and wealth issues, it will become more positive. People will be moving through the grief concerns that they have, and they're going to be more readily accessible to consider gifts and engaging in the nonprofit world. So we want to make sure that we stay in contact with our donors to know where they are. How are they progressing? And then when the donor is ready, we're going to have a solid relationship with that person because you've been paying attention. Some of the nonprofits that I'm working with, the president of the organization has been making 5 to 10 calls a day, staying in touch with people. You should have your list of people that you want to stay in contact with, and I encourage you to use a variety of media to stay in contact with people. Now, some of the nonprofits, the more sophisticated ones that I'm working with, are considering and using an actual rating system just for this time, this virtual asking environment. They're rating somebody on their ability and their interest, and of course, their readiness. And they're using an extra column in their database, which basically has a plus sign to say someone's ready, a minus sign to say they're not ready, and an equal sign that basically says they're in a good state, but they're not ready quite yet. So they're doing some really simple tracking to make sure that they understand who's ready to consider a gift in these virtual times. Next, I encourage you to make sure that you have a phone discussion with the donor to confirm that he or she is ready to consider a major gift or a next step toward a major gift, and seek their willingness to have the virtual meeting. We call this a pre-ask, and what you're doing here is a virtual pre-ask. This is really intense stuff. This is a pro tip. This is for people that are more experienced and are fast learners. These are the folks that want to pay attention to this information that I'm sharing with you on this pre-ask. A pre-ask is asking a donor for permission or agreement to discuss a specific gift for a specific purpose for your nonprofit. In the virtual environment and with all this uncertainty of health and wealth issues, we need to make sure that we're talking with people to make sure that they're ready for a solicitation or for the next step. And I'm working with all the people that I coach and mentor to make sure that they're thinking about doing a pre-ask. It's to determine, as I said, the readiness of the person. And what we want to be doing is understanding the purpose is that we want to have a conversation, but we have to be aware that there are reasons for not having a virtual meeting. It's a double-edged sword, so we've got to be extra careful. First, we want to determine the donor's readiness to consider a gift and move forward. That's what a virtual pre-ask is really trying to do. Then we want to identify and relieve any concerns that the donor has about a meeting, about moving forward. We want to hear any possible issues or opportunities that the donor is considering, and we want to understand how tech savvy the donor is so that we really match up what we're trying to do with their tech savviness. Then we want to make sure that we determine the best path forward. Based on all the information that we've gathered, we want to determine the best path forward. Greg Warner, in his book, Engagement Fundraising, talks about, and I quote, reducing friction, unquote. And that's what we're trying to do when we're trying to do this pre-ask. We're trying to get donors to opt in to this meeting. We want to, of course, state the urgency. We want this to not slip. And you need to make sure that in your mind you have clarity around why this is urgent, because the donor is going to push back and say, do we need to do this now? Why do we need to do this now? And you need to be ready to answer that question. Next, I want to encourage you to make sure that in the pre-ask, You are ready to talk about what you want, because some people are going to say, well, just tell me what you want. Tell me what you want right now. And you need to decide right there and then, am I going to do the ask now, or am I really going to wait and say, no, I'd really like to have our CEO on the line. There's some other people that need to be engaged in this that aren't here right now. So let's schedule this as a virtual meeting. Asking somebody for, or somebody telling you, just tell me, how much, what you want, is kind of like asking for the check before you order the meal. So we don't want to do that. And if you're running a restaurant, I guarantee you don't want to do that. So let's make sure that we don't ask unless the donor is entirely ready. When you're doing the pre-ask, you're not there to ask. You're just there to gather this information and get a date for the actual ask to take place. But if they're ready, you need to make sure that you are ready for that when that happens. All right? Now, when you have a prior relationship with a donor, you want to start where you left off. Were you getting ready to do an ask? Because then you need to be ready to have a conversation, a pre-ask, about doing an ask. Were they paying on a pledge, and you need to talk about that? Were you supposed to be sending them information? You need to be thinking about that. Were you setting up a meeting for them to meet with an expert, someone who can really answer their questions? You need to make sure that you're ready to do those things, that you can start where the relationship was, so that you are definitely ready to move forward wherever it was. Don't leave things open-ended. Double and triple check with your donor to make sure that they're ready to move forward, to make sure that they have the bandwidth and liquidity to explore a potential gift with you. Now, if you're working with some donors who don't have a strong relationship with you, maybe they have a limited prior relationship, some of you are able to see this as a real opportunity to reach out to these past donors or to potentially new donors and look for ways to expand your donor pool with those who have some capacity to move forward. And these are some of the best practices that I want to establish with you right now about moving forward with these types of people. First, I encourage you to have a reason to contact these folks. People that you don't have a really strong relationship or no prior relationship with, great time to be reaching out to them. You want to make sure that you're clear about why you're reaching out to them. It may be to ask them a question. It may be to seek their opinion. It may be to get their reaction. It may be to get some valuable feedback on a pressing issue or an opportunity. You may want to update them on an investment that maybe they made a few years ago and they haven't made a gift to you all in the past, and you want to engage them in that discussion. Or, of course, there's the president asked me to contact you. Somebody, maybe it's a volunteer or someone who knows them, someone who's a warm contact for you, said, you should call Bob. And you might want to mention Bob's name right there. Next, you want to make sure that you have something significant of importance, I think, to offer them, something that is of value. And I'm not talking about some trinket or a keychain or something like that. The pro tip here is to have something of value that connects the greater awareness of the person to an urgent opportunity. And it's even better when you know that it matches the donor's desired impact. Now, that's a pro tip, like I said, but that's what you're looking for, is that connectiveness in whatever you're offering the person of value. It may be a book, it may be an article, it may be an invitation to a meeting. It may be something that's going on that really connects to their interest, and therefore that's really, really good. Next, I encourage you to remember that the headline, the message, really matters. It matters greatly. Whatever your front story is, whatever you're saying on the front end, you got to make sure that it grabs their attention and that it's something they're going to want to respond to. Next, I encourage you to be core, not new. The research that I'm seeing about donors giving in this environment is that they are focused, but they are giving. So we need to make sure that we are where they're focused. They're more likely to give to organizations that they most care about. So we want to present ourselves as being core to them. Next, I encourage you to keep it short. Whether it's an email or a phone call, keep it short. And then I encourage you to understand that you may require more cultivation steps. In fact, it's very likely that you will. And then, of course, when you've done all of this and you're really ready to go, here's where you're trying to end up. You're having a phone conversation, you're talking with the person, and you're doing the pre-ask, and where you want to go is, would you be willing to have a virtual meeting to discuss a gift to the program that you're interested in? Would you like to do that soon, or would you prefer for us to have that meeting in 2 weeks? One of the things that I like to do is give people an option between two things, both of which are perfectly fine with me. Now look at the name that you have, and I want you to think, does that work for you? And if not, think about a different word than willing. It might be a word such as comfortable. Would you be comfortable? Would you be agreeable to a meeting? Would you be inclined? There's all kinds of different ways that you can fit your personality here. And what I want you to do is think about what works best for you. Now, the pro tip here is do not leave this open-ended. Set a date for the meeting and or the next step, and let's make sure that that's really, really clear. I also want to encourage you to be prepared to state why the meeting is urgent and why it can't be in person. It needs to happen right now. If we can't meet in person, it needs to happen right now. I mentioned this before to you. Make sure that you're ready to talk about it. Here's what's going on. Here's why this is important for us to meet virtually so that we can move this forward. I never want to assume a donor is prepared to have this discussion. In fact, that really opens up to listening when you don't assume anything. We've talked about assuming and presuming already. Next, I want to encourage you to understand that it's crucial to be sure you have the donor's approval to move forward. Is it better next week or early next month? Let's get their agreement on that. And then, folks, schedule the meeting. Once you have that meeting scheduled, you can move forward to other things, and we'll talk about them in a second. You want to have your calendar open, schedule the meeting, get it on their calendar, and let's move forward. Now, let's talk about some other things that we have to do to schedule the virtual meeting, to schedule and set up that virtual ask. Here are things that we need to be doing to set up that meeting. I want to make sure that I'm identifying who's going to be in the virtual meeting. I want to make sure that I select people who will enhance the solicitation experience and who will not confuse the donor. I also like to consider the communications channels and make sure that I'm choosing one that's right. Now, one of the things I want to mention here in choosing the communication channel and thinking about who's going to be on is it's your responsibility to prepare those who will be on the call with you. Be sure everyone understands their role. So we're considering the communications channel. We've got the people selected that we're going to have. Those people that we're inviting should have, I think it's best when they have some kind of a relationship with the donor, and that's one of our overarching principles and the obstacles that we talk about. We want to be considering all of those things when we think about our communication channel. Next, I really want to encourage you to prepare for the meeting by getting your materials ready. You may want to have a PowerPoint that's easy to read and understand. I encourage you to have 7 slides max. I know I've got 100 in this, but I'm encouraging you to keep it simple. You may want to have some pre-recorded videos, 2 minutes max. I'm going to talk about a few of those as we go through the actual meeting. You may want to go ahead and prepare for the funding proposal. You may want to actually write the proposal that you want the person to have, because you may want to email that ahead of time. They may ask for you to send it to them ahead of time, or you may want to present it at the actual virtual ask that you're doing, or you may want to send it after the virtual meeting, and therefore you want to have it ready to go. You may have to make some last minute edits, but you want to have it absolutely 100% ready to go. Let's make sure that you are figuring out who the virtual meeting provider is going to be. A great rule of thumb here is to ask if your donor has a personal preference, and make sure that you're ready to meet that preference. I use Zoom, I use Webinar Jam, I use Free Conference Call, I use Microsoft Teams, I use GoToMeeting. I use all kinds of software. Some I'm better at than others, but I'm capable of using all of them. Next, I encourage you to make sure that you start to work on your detailed presentation. Remember, you are not a participant, but rather you're the leader. Therefore, you have to prepare yourself to look your best and to really be ready. And that includes Tech preparation, your mic, you need to make sure that's working, your camera, your background, to make sure that it's simple and not distracting itself. You also want to make sure that you understand where to look. Do you look at the camera or the screen? If you're looking at the screen, you're not looking the person in the eye. You need to make sure that you're looking at the camera, and you need to get used to that. That's something that we have to do. Of course, you want to practice speaking clearly, because this is a different medium than being in person with people. And then we want to make sure that we're also bringing our energy. Folks, I'm telling you, in the virtual environment, boring is really boring. So you want to make sure you bring your energy. Next, I'm going to encourage you to prepare your actual presentation. Personalize the meeting and the presentation itself. And here's a pro tip for you. You want to be asking interactive questions. And here's a really cool way of doing that. You present some data or some information to the donor, and you say, here's the insight that we gained from that. Here's the conclusion that we have from that information. And then you ask the donor, does this align with your thinking? Does this sound right to you? Have you had a different experience that you would like to tell us about? But the idea here is present information, share your insight, and then ask, does that align with your thinking? And that's a great way to ask interactive questions and to really be trying to draw our donors and their thinking into what it is we're talking about. And I also want you to be prepared to ask what I call check-in questions. Questions that you're going to ask the donor to keep them engaged and to make sure that the social cues that you may be missing because you're virtual and not in person, that you're hearing them anyway. So they're check-in questions that I encourage you to consider, such as, is this helpful? Does this resonate with you? Or is this clear? Those are intentional interaction questions, and make sure that you're preparing those as part of your detailed presentation. Next, I encourage you to prepare for likely objections. You know this donor, you know what they may say to object, you know what other donors have said to object. Make sure that you're ready to answer those objections. Practice. Know your answers and your tech workarounds. It's really rare for me to have a webinar or any kind of interaction via the web where there isn't some kind of a technical problem. So know your workarounds as you can. Consider sending materials ahead of time before the meeting. That's one of the things I talked about in making those materials, getting them written. Then you want to decide whether or not I'm going to send them ahead of time. Am I planning to show them at the meeting, or am I going to send them afterwards? Let's make sure you're thinking about that. Inform the donor who will be in the virtual meeting. People don't like surprises. Make sure they know who's going to be there. Now, I want you right now to look at your name. And I want to ask you this question: what are you going to do next? What are you going to do to set up that virtual meeting with the person that you wrote down? What are you doing next? Make a note right now in your notes. What are you doing next to set up that meeting with the person that you want to see? Now I want to talk about making the actual virtual ask. We've set it all up. We've done all our preparation. We've done the pre-ask, all the things I've talked about our can-do attitude, and we're ready to go. First, folks, let's be confident. Let's be comfortable. Let's smile. Let's practice. Let's make sure that we are ready to go. Confidence matters. It comes through on the internet just like it comes through in person. So do your best to come across as comfortable and confident. I talked about before, be clear and be simple. Clarity and simplicity are even more important for the virtual environment. Brief and to the point matters. Long-winded pitches are never good when asking for gifts, and they're especially ineffective when you're not face-to-face. Next, I encourage you to set a comfortable pace overall. Conduct the meeting as you would any fundraising meeting and or any virtual meeting. I like to start, of course, with welcomes and introductions, get people comfortable. I like to have a conversation of informal talk to connect people, especially if there are a number of people on the call, on the virtual visit here. I want to make sure that we are talking about maybe what's happened since the last time we talked. Maybe there's a story that I can tell that connects the donors to the other people that are in the room. There's some things like that that we can be doing. Let's think about any immediate issues that are on the donor's mind. That's a question that I like to ask in that setup time where we're just getting comfortable with each other. Is there anything that's on your mind that we should be talking about first, or that you want to make sure we talk about as a part of our meeting? Great way to get that interaction going right away. So we're setting that comfortable pace. One of the things I want to do is do a time check. I have this scheduled for us to be together for an hour. Is that still your plan? Oh, no, I got 20 minutes. Okay, then we need to move forward and we need to make some changes in our plans. I like to make sure that I'm thinking about, am I having a conversation with a friend, a donor, a partner, a board member, a big shot, whatever it is. I want to act appropriately. Think about the relationship that we have with this person and act appropriately. We want to be warm, but not overly familiar. We don't want to flirt or needlessly patronize people. We want to make sure that we're genuine in all that we do. Next, I encourage you to review the agenda and plan for the meeting so that everyone knows what's going to be happening. Let's talk about that. We want to make sure that we state to the donor what you want the donor to know or to do. One of the things I like to do at the beginning of the meeting, here's what we're going to be talking about, and we're going to give you an opportunity to make a significant contribution to this, assuming that this aligns with your interests, as I think it will. I want to make sure that I talk about the purpose of the meeting. The purpose is to. The purpose of our meeting is to. And let's make sure that we fill in that blank and talk about that with our donor. One of the things that we may do in our meeting after we've had all this set up and this informal talk and ask these questions that I just outlined, we may want to have a beneficiary, someone who has received benefit from our services, to make a 2 to 4 minute statement, basically kind of a testimonial. And this can be done live, or it can be done as part of a video. If they do it live, when they're done talking, they say, "Thank you very much, Mr. Donor, for visiting with us, and it's been a pleasure to meet you, and I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye. It's been nice to visit with you. By the way, tell your spouse, tell your wife I said hi, and I look forward to seeing her sometime soon." Okay, so let's make sure that we're doing that. Next, we might want to have some kind of a video overview of our nonprofit. Depending on how well the donor knows us, we may want to do some kind of a video overview. Now, here's a pro tip for everybody. Stories and statements from beneficiaries, the video that we're showing them, all of this is to create emotional engagement. And I like to create that emotional engagement at the beginning of the meeting so that I carry it through the whole meeting as we move toward the ask. Let's make sure that we're thinking about that. Next, I may have the CEO or the program director do a presentation, possibly on the PowerPoint with a screen share if that's desired, and they're going to present very simply, 30,000 foot. Don't get in the weeds here. People will glaze over the issue, the opportunity, and the plan. Like I said, no weeds. We're not getting in the weeds here. Let's present them the high level information and then move forward from there. Next, what I like to do in a virtual meeting is have a third-party endorser make a statement, someone who's a board member, someone who's already made a gift to this project, to say, here's why I like the nonprofit, here's why I made my gift. There's nothing better than a third-party endorsement. And again, that person can sign on and sign off just like the beneficiary of services did before. Next, I like to have the prospect manager, the fundraiser, do the specific ask for the pledge or for the gift. And I want to make sure that I'm reviewing possibly the key elements of the proposal. I may put that on screen share. I have a few slides to share about that as part of the presentation and the ask that I want to do. And if the donor is ready to commit, let the donor make the gift and let's move forward from there. If they have questions, objections, let's make sure that we're ready to answer those questions and objections. And if the donor is not ready to commit, let's make sure that we determine and agree to the next step. And here's the pro tip here. Include the date and the media for the next meeting right then and there. Do not let this slip away from you, folks. I understand. Here are the answers. Here's the information I'm going to be sending to you by such and such a date. I look forward to meeting with you on whatever date it will be, and I'll set up the virtual ask. I'll be sending you an invitation to do that. Then I want to summarize. This is another really critical point here, folks. The better the summary, the more likely follow-up will happen. So pay attention all through the meeting so that you can give a really good, really succinct summary of what's going to be happening, what we talked about, and what's going to be happening next. I want to encourage you to be thoughtful and intentional in creating that interaction. Like I said, one of the things that's difficult in the virtual environment is watching for body language. I don't have the body language, but I do have facial clues. And facial clues can actually be more revealing than body language. So the pro tip here is learn to read facial cues. Be ready to listen to what people say through their face. And there may be differences here. For instance, dropping the head can be a negative, or it can be deep thought, or it can be reflection. And all of those are different. Nodding can be agreement or understanding, and those are different. Shaking a head can mean no, or it can be disdain, or it can be unbelief. All of those are different. So what you want to make sure that you do is that you match the words with the head movement. You want to make sure that you're matching the words with the head movement. And if you're unsure about what you're seeing, what you want to do is ask. You know, I see you saying this. Are you indicating agreement? Or do you really think this is strong? You want to be asking and making sure you understand the facial cues and how they match with what you're hearing and seeing to make sure that it's all matching up there. And if you're unsure, like I said, ask. That's always a good thing to do. I encourage you to be comfortable with the silence. You know, in a virtual environment, there's a time lag very often, and we need to make sure that we're comfortable with the silence. Don't feel the need to speak into it. Let the time lag happen and let the donor respond. Give them time to respond. Now, what are you going to do when the donor has no camera? What are you going to do? Write it down right now so that you're prepared for that, because it's going to happen. Somebody's not going to have a camera. You thought they were. It's not working, whatever reason. Let me tell you the answer, folks. We're going to move forward. We're going to go to plan B. All the time, anytime I'm doing a virtual meeting, I always have a plan B. Next, I really want to encourage you to listen. People talk because they want to be heard, and you have to show that you are hearing. Do not interrupt the people. Do not finish their sentences. Sure, you want to clarify and ask appropriate questions, and you also want to comment with the appropriate response. Be sure you allow time for discussion, for questions, and objections. Remember, times for response can be delayed because of electronics and internet speed, so make sure that you're comfortable with the silence and that you allow that time to move forward. Now, if the donor is asked for more information, then what you want to do is make sure that you're ready to give them that information. Agree on a plan and move forward. So that's what you want to be doing. If the donor isn't ready to make the commitment, or they ask for more information, let's make sure that we allow them time to do that. Now it's time, folks, to close the virtual ask. You've asked for the gift. They say yes, no, maybe. If they say yes, boom, we're moving forward. We're closing it. We're moving forward with the details that we need. We want to be following up with the meeting in appropriate communications from the CEO, the program director, the fundraiser, the endorser, whoever was on the call, the virtual meeting. Everybody should be writing a note. It can be an email right away. It can be a handwritten note. Each one will be saying something different, and we want to make sure that we're managing that process. But let's follow up with appropriate communications from everyone involved. Then we want to send that requested information by the agreed upon date, and then we want to send the proposal and a pledge card if it's modified from what we wrote or we didn't send it before. But let's go ahead and get that proposal in the mail to them. And then on the agreed upon date, we're going to follow up on your virtual ask with a second virtual meeting or a phone call to close the gift, whatever the donor has agreed to. Now, the pro tip here, all right, we just went through all this stuff. The pro tip here is to evaluate what went well? What worked well? And what do we want to do better next time? At the end of every virtual meeting, virtual interaction, virtual ask, everything that we're doing, we should be asking, what went well and what do we want to improve? And that's a pro tip for you to really use all the time in everything that you do. I really encourage you to do that. Hey, man, we've gone through all this. Ben, what a great amount of information. Let me give you some closing thoughts. First of all, folks, before the closing thoughts, let me give a quick shout out to some professionals who really helped develop this for me. And these folks I've never met, but I want to mention them to you because if you want more information, you can look them up on the web. Abstract Marketing Group. They're one that I looked at. 10 tips for conducting virtual business-to-business sales pitches. Articles from nonprofit leaders, including Jim Eskin, Jessica Cloud, and Alan Cantor. Those folks were all very helpful to me in looking at updated information, and I wanted to share their names with you. Now, the first closing thought for you is we can do this, folks. Frankly, I've been surprised at how well it's gone. That's what he said to me a few months ago, and it's continued to go really well. One organization that I connect with has a new $2 million donor from someone who has previously given them $36. Another client had a record year of $235 million that they raised, a record year. Another client is about to raise, they already have completed this now, over $4 million and a $4 million goal. They've exceeded that. I think they're up to $6 or $7 million that they've raised in a short period of time. I think they did this in like 2 or 3 months. It was amazing what they did. Another client had a goal of a $10 million for a day of giving, which is something that we do a lot here. And they raised $23 million against a $10 million goal in 1 day of giving. Numerous fundraisers that I'm working with, that I coach and mentor, are receiving their first major gifts. Folks, we can do this. And I want you to really understand that that is really important for us to bring that really can do attitude here, folks. Look at your donor names. What are your plans to virtually solicit these donors and close their major gift? Look at them. Look at those names right now. What is your plan to close that gift? What are you doing next, and where are you going from there? Let's make sure that we're closing that gift. And then this closing thought for you: highly successful fundraisers know how to adapt and innovate. They find the road to success. They will learn how to virtually ask as another way to close major gifts. Folks, we can do this, and I'm really pleased about that. If you found something helpful in all of this information that I've shared with you, and I hope you have, I want to invite you to go to a free 45-minute strategy session that we have to learn more about how our coaching and all our fundraising consulting services can help you be a highly successful fundraiser and help your organization raise more money. All you have to do is contact Arthur at focusedonfundraising.com, and he will set up that 45-minute strategy session with you. It is free. We do this all the time, and we're happy to provide that for you. And then I also want to encourage you to sign up for our tip for highly successful fundraisers. This is free also. You can go to focusedonfundraising.com/resources to receive that tip, and you will want to do that. We have thousands of readers all around the world, and you will want to be receiving this tip on best practices and information about how to do fundraising management and leadership all the time. We also have our 21 tips for highly successful fundraisers. That's our book. It's an Amazon international bestseller, and you can go to Amazon to order that book. We're happy to share that with you. And then, of course, if you want to receive a written and video fundraising tips, as I said, go to focusedonfundraising.com/resources. That's on your screen right now. I'm really grateful to all the people that helped us present all this. There are some articles that I want to make sure that you are aware of. I'm including those here so that you can pull those out if you want to see the information that I've used to help pull all this together. And let me just close with a thank you to all of you for being here, and also to all the people who do all the great work to put a webinar like this together. I really do appreciate it. I hope you've gotten some useful information. I certainly encourage you to rely on Focused on Fundraising for world-class information on best practices in fundraising, management, and leadership. I'm Ben Case, fundraising guru for Focused on Fundraising, and it's really great to be with you. I look forward to interacting with you again. Thanks.